In those same days, there reigned a king of the solar line named Trisanku, so enamored of his own beauty that the thought of surrendering his body to death filled him with horror. Other men might pray for the soul's release, but Trisanku wanted the impossible: to climb into heaven alive in this very flesh and never lose the form he so admired. He carried his strange desire to Vasishtha, his family preceptor, begging the sage to work the wonder for him. But Vasishtha only shook his head and told him plainly to abandon so impossible a hope. Unwilling to accept refusal, the stubborn king went next to Vasishtha's 100 sons, thinking that where the father had failed, the sons might yet be won. Vasishtha's sons flared with anger at being asked to overturn their own father's word. They mocked the king's vanity and told him sharply to be gone. Stung, Trishanku shot back that since they and their father were plainly too poor in merit to help him, he would simply carry his request to greater men who could. That taunt was more than the proud young ascetics could bear. Their eyes blazed, and with the terrible power of their penance, they hurled a curse upon the king. "Since you scorn us," they cried, "become a Chandala, an outcast, the lowest of the low." The dreadful words left their lips and sped unseen toward Trishanku like an arrow already loosed. By the next dawn, the curse had done its cruel work. Trishanku woke a wholly different being. The proud beauty he had loved was gone, and in its place was the coarse, haggard body of an untouchable, wrapped in filthy rags, ugly and unclean. The king, who could not bear to lose his fair form, had lost it utterly overnight when he stumbled into his own court. None of his ministers or people knew the ragged creature before them. The guards saw only a filthy outcast where their king should stand, and drove him roughly from the palace, cast out of the very city he had ruled. Trishanku wandered beyond the gates, homeless and unrecognized in the shell of his cursed body. For days the fallen king wandered the wilderness, hungry, footsore and half-dead, an outcast shunned by every living soul he met. But destiny was quietly guiding his weary steps. At last, stumbling through the deep forest, he came upon the hermitage of the sage Viswamitra and sunk down near it, too spent to go a single step further. The sage Viswamitra came upon the pitiful stranger and felt his heart stir with compassion. Something in that ruined face seemed strangely familiar. Kneeling near him, the sage asked gently, "Are you not Trishanku, the king? What terrible fate has reduced you to this? Whose curse has fallen upon you to leave you in so wretched a state?" Trishanku poured out his whole sorry tale and fell weeping at the sage's feet. "I have been a just king," he cried, "never straying once from the path of dharma. I have wronged no one and committed no sin. Yet my own preceptor and his sons have abandoned me and cursed me. And you see the pitiful result before you." Pity welled up in Viswamitra. For whatever his powers, the sage was a man ruled by his heart, swept easily by anger, by love, and by sudden compassion. The sight of a righteous king, so unjustly broken, kindled both tenderness and a rising defiance in him. Here, he resolved, was a wrong that his own great penance would set right. With warm and steady words, the sage lifted the king's spirits. "I have heard of your righteous rule," he said. "Here you shall have refuge. So fear nothing more. I will hold a sacrifice mighty enough to carry you into heaven in your own body, and even in this cursed Chandala form you shall ascend. Whatever your guru's curse decreed, true to his word, Viswamitra threw all his energy into preparing a sacrifice such as the world had never seen. In a broad forest clearing, his disciples raised the altar and the sacred fire pits, gathered the offerings, and made ready every vessel and post that so vast a rite demanded. Nothing would be spared to bend heaven itself to his will. Viswamitra sent his disciples far and wide to summon every sage and their pupils to the sacrifice. His invitation was less a request than a command, and few dared refuse a rishi so famed for his power and his temper. One by one, though some came reluctantly, the holy men agreed to attend the strange and daring rite. Only the sons of Vasishtha refused to come. They laughed openly at the whole affair, sneering that here was a sacrifice, where the officiating priest was a mere former kshatriya, and the man for whom it was held nothing but a stinking chandala. Such a rite, they scoffed, was far beneath the dignity of true Brahmins like themselves. When their jeering reply was carried back to him, Viswamitra erupted in fury. If they scorned his sacrifice, they would learn the full weight of his wrath. He pronounced a fearful curse upon Vasishtha's sons, that they should die and be born again for 7 wretched generations among a lowly tribe that fed on the flesh of dogs. Then the great sacrifice began in earnest. Around a towering fire, the assembled sages chanted, while Viswamitra, praising the fallen king's virtues, called upon them all to lend their power and carry Trisanku bodily up to heaven. Ghee hissed into the flames. Mantras rolled like thunder, and the whole forest clearing glowed beneath the sacred blaze. The rite mounted at last to its crucial hour, when the gods themselves were called to descend and receive the offerings. The sages invoked them with all due solemnity. But the sky stayed stubbornly empty. Not a single god appeared. The sacrifice had plainly failed, and the watching rishis hid quiet, knowing smiles at Viswamitra's public humiliation. Rage and pride surged up in Viswamitra. Lifting the ladle of ghee high over the flames, he cried aloud that he would show them all his power. Every particle of merit his lifetime of penance had earned, he would now pour out for Trisanku Sake. Let the gods spurn my offerings if they dare, he thundered. King Trisanku, rise. And then the impossible happened before the astonished eyes of every sage. Trisanku's coarse chandala body lifted from the earth and rose steadily into the sky. Borne aloft by the sheer force of Viswamitra's austerities, higher and higher he climbed toward heaven, living proof of a power that could defy the very order of the worlds. But at the gates of Swarga stood Indra, king of the gods, who barred his way in scorn. Who are you, he demanded, to force your way into heaven in an outcast's body? Fool, cursed by your own preceptor, fall back to the earth where you belong. And with that, he flung Trisanku headlong, screaming, down out of the sky. Down Trisanku plunged, head over heels, shrieking Viswamitra.
Save me!
The sage looked up, and his fury blazed hotter than any sacrificial fire. He would not let the gods make sport of him. Stop! He roared to the falling king. Stop there! And to the wonder of all, Trisanku froze in the empty air and hung suspended, shining like a newborn star, his anger still unspent. Viswamitra resolved to teach the gods a lesson they would never forget. Like a second Brahma, he set to work, conjuring a whole new heaven in the southern sky, fresh constellations of his own making, and even a new Indra and new gods to rule them, rivals to the very heaven that had cast his king down. Heaven itself grew alarmed as this rival creation spread. If Viswamitra went on, there would soon be 2 of everything, and the ordered universe would collapse into chaos. So the frightened devas came humbly to him and pleaded, let Trisanku stay where he hangs. Let your new stars shine forever as your glory. Only curb your anger and be our friend. Viswamitra, as quickly soothed as he had been roused, was pleased by their submission and let his creating cease. Trisanku he left hanging among the southern stars, where he shines to this day. But the vast feat had burned up every ounce of spiritual power his penance had won, and the sage found, to his dismay, that he must begin all over again. Undaunted, Viswamitra journeyed west to the holy lake of Pushkara and took up his penance once more. For years it deepened, but just as it neared its fruit, some small provocation stung him, and in a flash of temper, he cursed his own sons. Ashamed the moment it passed, he swore a solemn vow never again to yield to anger and began afresh. After many more years of unbroken effort, Lord Brahma appeared before him with the Devas at his side. "O Kaushika," said the Creator, "your penance has borne fruit. You have risen above the rank of kings and become a true rishi at last." Having spoken this blessing over him, Brahma withdrew once more into the heavens. Yet again, the honor fell short of his hunger. To be called a rishi was still not to be a Brahma rishi, still not the equal of Vasishtha, and that alone was the prize Viswamitra craved. Setting his teeth against every lesser blessing, he resolved to press his austerities harder and more relentlessly than he ever had before. The gods, uneasy at his growing power, resolved to break his penance with pleasure, where they could not with force. They sent down the ravishing celestial nymph, Menka. She came to Pushkara and played before him with 100 graces. And Viswamitra, catching sight of her beauty, was utterly enchanted. His vow shattered, and 10 sweet years drifted by as in a dream. When at last Viswamitra awoke from that long enchantment, he saw with sorrow how far he had fallen. Yet he would not curse the trembling Menka. The fault, he said, was his own weakness and not hers. She had only obeyed the master who had sent her. And so, heavy with shame, he parted from her and turned toward the Himalayas to take up his broken penance once more. In the high Himalayas, Viswamitra mastered his senses and performed penance for 1,000 years. Pleased at last, Brahma appeared and welcomed him warmly as a Maharshi. But when the sage humbly asked whether the title meant he had truly conquered his senses, the Creator answered no. Strive on, tiger among sages, and subdue them yet. So he set himself to that supreme conquest. Alarmed anew, Indra sent the lovely nymph Rambha with the god of love and the spirit of spring to aid her. At her coming, the forest burst into blossom and sweet bird song filled the air. Viswamitra opened his eyes upon her beauty, but this time he recognized the trap, and in a white blaze of anger cursed the trembling Rambha to stand frozen as stone for 10,000 years. But even as the curse left his lips, Viswamitra grieved, for his outburst showed how far he still stood from his goal. Sorrowfully, he abandoned the Himalayan woods and sought the utter solitude of the east. There he stilled his very breath, emptied his mind of every worldly thing, and burned in austerities so fierce that smoke and flame poured from his body and rolled across the worlds. At the pleading of the frightened gods, Brahma came and hailed him Brahma Rishi at last. Yet Viswamitra would not rest content until Vasishtha himself spoke the words. His old rival came, smiling, and embraced him as an equal. "You have won the fruit of your penance. Truly, you are a Brahma Rishi, my brother." So, amid great rejoicing, ended the long striving of the sage who now stood before Dashratha.